Stevenson, whichever you want to call me today.
And my name is Kathleen, and I am a student of Dr. Stevenson at Westchester.
She doesn't get to call me Linda, she just calls me Dr. Stevenson.
I probably could.
So yeah, so I teach at Westchester. I've been there for 15 years. I started when my son Camilo, like your name, was born, and I moved here from sometime in Kentucky. Before that I lived for 7 years in Mexico. So I know Mexico well. I met my spouse in Mexico and I dragged him back. And so we live here, but he originated from Chile and then was studying in Mexico. And so I have some roots in different places in Latin America. And so I speak Spanish and keep getting better every day, or more entertaining every day, depending on mi español mezclado de chileno con mexicano con argentino con no sé qué. Like I just pick up stuff and put it in all the time. It's kind of fun. So, and then I have students like Kathleen at Westchester.
I'm originally from Bethlehem, so from the Lehigh Valley. It wasn't until I got to Westchester that I decided to study Latino cultures and Latin America. I do have a little bit of background, my family background. I've been to Colombia, and that kind of did show me a side of the world that I really wanted to see more of. And so I'm working so hard to learn Spanish, and I'm getting there. And so through my studies, I hope to get better with that as well.
So today in this session, what we want to do is, my colleague from Westchester, who was actually originally from Chile, she's teaches in languages and culture. She's ill today, so she was not able to come. So Kathleen is going to do her piece on some stereotypes, which I'm sure you all are familiar with. So that's kind of our cultural piece, and then we'll ease our way into thinking about the politics of our moment together, and just some of the different ways to think about how immigration is being framed by our political leaders and by us, and that exchange that is, grassroots politics to local politics to international politics. So I'm just going to share some of the different pieces of that puzzle with you, and some of the things that we work on at the university and that I work on in my research. And then at the end, if we have time, we also are working on developing a survey to try to capture people's thoughts about immigration experiences that have been either empowering or disempowering. And so maybe later on we can talk about how we might have a session on another day to talk for your input, to look for your input into what would you want to be asked. And like, we're trying to develop a survey, and we'd love to know what you guys think would be useful for letting people tell their stories about how immigration has impacted their lives, coming, going, staying, leaving, all those kinds of aspects of what that means. Right? So that's kind of where we're headed with some of our own work. All right, so you want to start with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm going to talk about the Latino narrative today and how the stereotypes of Latinos in everyday life. I'm assuming you all know what a stereotype is. Do you know what a stereotype is? Can you tell me what a stereotype is? No? Okay, we'll figure it out then. So first of all, what is a stereotype? It's a mixture of ethnocentrism and prejudice. So ethnocentrism, view of things in which one's own group is the center of everything and all others are scaled or rated with reference to it. So, thinking that ethnically you are better than someone who might just look different than you or come from a different place than you, and it's the us and them mentality. And then prejudice is judging others as innately inferior based on ethnocentrically determined difference, and that's the idea that they cannot change. And so, this comes in, just by judging people based on skin color, or the civil rights movement. That was prejudice. A lot of that was coming out there. We learn stereotypes in everyday society, and we learn them through these channels. We learn them in our neighborhoods, social media, TV and films, news, from our peers, political discourse, and commercial advertisement. So they gather negative traits and assemble them into a particular image. So from your experiences, from these different channels, what have you seen that would maybe reinforce a stereotype? From maybe political discourse. I know, for instance, the current administration has painted Latinos specifically from Mexico as criminals or violent people, and that's something that we have to be aware of because it's not true. Go ahead.
Well, this comments on the other side, we went to this place and then Omar teached us about like 43 kids from Mexico got captured and they don't know where is it. They keep saying it's chicken bones, cow bones, and everything like that.
Yeah. Okay. So that's certainly something that we can keep in mind. And then, other things too, TV and film, stuff like that. And we'll keep on going to show you those. So these are the big 4 stereotypes. We have the feisty and sexy, the help, the super gangsta, and the only speak Spanish, very little English. And you can see these. I'm just going to go right ahead and go actually to this slide right here, the examples. So for Modern Family, how many people have watched Modern Family? Anyone? Yeah? Okay, so, obviously there's a Latino character there. Her name escapes me.
Sofia Vergara.
Sofia Vergara, yeah, see. She is the feisty, sexy stereotype. And then right below that, we have its Family Guy. And of course, she's painted as the help, the maid. Yeah. Jane the Virgin, Maid in Manhattan, and Scarface, all these examples. Can you guys think of any other examples? Yes? No? Maybe?
No.
No? Okay. But I'm going to go back to these slides here. So Latinos in stereotypical TV and film roles. As you can see, based on the respondents, 36% of Latinos in stereotypical TV they're painted as criminals, and 36% say that's very often. That happens very often. But then if you go down further, let's say to a lawyer or a judge, Latinos are painted as like only 5% of the time, very, very often. And as you can tell, it's a little bit more, not too often or never are they painted as the lawyer, but more often as the criminal or the gardener or the maid. And then news, this is the same way. This is an interesting bar graph because, Latino stereotypes, Latinos are on welfare. You see that more so, on Fox, but even a lot on MSNBC as well, which is, a more liberal-leaning news source. Or they take jobs, refuse English, or they have too many kids. Like, this is all rhetoric that we can see on channels such as news sources. And that ends up reinforcing how we picture people. And then here's another representation versus population. So the media represents Latinos as 69% of the time as maids, but in real life it's only 44.3%. So there's a gap there, there's a misrepresentation, as you can tell from the other indicators as well. Okay, and so we went over the examples. Okay, and there are a couple of videos. Should I play the videos too? Okay. Alright, this is I'm Latino, but I'm not.
I'm Latino, but I'm not a criminal.
I'm Latina, but I'm not spicy.
I'm Latino, but I'm not stealing your job. But I'm not a drug dealer.
But I'm not lazy. But I don't put up with machismo.
But I don't celebrate Cinco de Mayo.
I'm Latina, but I'm not Mexican. We're not all Mexican.
I'm Latino and I'm a creative artist.
I'm Latina and I love books.
I'm Latino and I'm Tejano.
And I have a master's degree.
And I love Lady Gaga.
And I read comic books.
And I am a geek. And I like to drink Coronas.
And I love spicy food.
And I'm often mistaken for a gringo.
And I'm a social justice activist.
And I'm a feminist.
I'm Latino and I'm American.
I'm Latina and I'm an American.
Growing up in my house,
you grew up knowing that you were human. You never really considered yourself Mexican. You just were.
Music and food were a big part of my life growing up.
You walk into my house and it smells like frijoles negros. And then you hear Salvo Gigante playing in the background.
We would always have those calendars from the panaderia hanging up in our kitchen.
My mom loved to cook with chiles. It would smoke up the entire house. But at the end of the day, you had some bomb-ass chiles that you
When you're at home here in El Salvador, when you walk out that door, you're in America. So you get a little bit of both.
Being Latino to me means being really close with my family. Sundays were for going on walks and hanging out with your immediate family.
For me to be Latino means having history.
Even though it wasn't taught at school, my dad made sure that we knew the history of Mexico. People would always like talk about like what it was like, their memories of Cuba.
Being Latino is complicated. On one hand, I'm Mexican. On the other hand, I'm American. Ni soy de aquí, ni soy de allá.
Every milestone I made wasn't about being the Latina who did this, it was about being Allie.
No one word could describe all of us.
We are a very beautiful, diverse community of people.
You just kind of have to grow up and learn that there are more people in the world ready to embrace you.
There's immigrants in the past, and there'll be immigrants in the future. Everyone deserves a shot, and it's our time now.
I'm Latina and I would never want to be anything else.
All right, and so, you know, these stereotypes do cause some issues. As the video pointed out, like Latinos are a diverse social group and that they don't fit into categories. And they limit our understanding of a diverse community. And it's the us and them mentality, it's the ethnocentrism again coming into play. Stereotypes completely, you know, cause the us and them mentality. Lead to derogatory images, marginalization, lack of opportunity, and discrimination. Latinos feel pressure to combat the stereotypes, and the repetition of these images normalize the stereotypical idea of Latinos in our heads without knowing the full context. So repetition normalizes. This is a very strong quote included here. When beliefs and images are uncontested or are even just dominant within a given society, individuals typically come to accept them as self-evident truths. An individual learns the cognitive models of his culture, like grammar, surely and effortlessly. And this is from a study of German attitudes towards Jewish people before World War II. So it's the problem with stereotypes, again, is they become the self-evident truths. People accept them as truths, but as we know, they most times aren't. So I do believe that is. There's one more video that I'll show you.
So what are some of the things that you know are not true, or that what you guys feel like are expressed through people of your generation coming through high school? What's more representative now?
I feel like what is in American culture is the same thing in like Mexican culture. So like in like every culture, no matter if you're American, Hispanic, Asian, it's like you're always gonna have that lover or the clown. You know, it's like it's all just different because of your skin, your accent, your language.
Right. You
So,
can play with it, but you don't have to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's when it's assumed that it's a problem.
Mhm.
Okay. Good. That's a good observation. Yeah, because we're always going to have clown personalities.
Yeah.
But the problem is if they're always black or brown and not white, or that kind of stuff. What else? What else do you guys? Who inspires you? When you think of different leaders and from different backgrounds. So who, like you go, I'd like to play him or her. Yeah?
Carmen.
Which Carmen? Oh, okay.
Because she teaches me about immigration, how people fight for their rights
Good.
and opportunities.
Awesome. Thanks. You guys got topics. Come on now.
I mean, I'm trying to remember the name. I can't forget. I can't remember the
Or
name.
describe the type of person.
She is the type. She's Latina, and she is, I guess, when there's something wrong, she's the one who steps up. So she kind of stands out for herself and for anybody besides herself too. And I like that, the way she is, the confidence she has, and I like that.
I like that you said the confidence she has, because that's not something that not all of us have, right? Like it's something we might want to have to build up or practice or, yeah. I mean, anybody, us who are student presenting, like.
I wasn't expecting you to say.
She stepped up. What about you guys? Anything?
How about you? What is one?
Actually, I kind of echo what you're saying about leaders, like people who go above and beyond. I think that they impress me. And it doesn't always have to be the person who's, like the one who got elected or the one who's number one or has the highest, like in our world, grading points are a big deal, right? But a lot of times people do things at another level, like make a really cool t-shirt or something like that, that's also like inspired.
I think it's Cesar Chavez, of course, the movement that he created in this country.
Yeah.
With agricultural labor. I guess it's going on 50 years now.
Right.
I think his daughter is still very active as head of the large.
Her name is Camila. She came and spoke to students in Kennett one time.
Yes.
Yeah.
He changed migrant labor and the conditions and ensured certain minimal standards of treatment and salary and all that.
Right.
With great effectiveness, tremendous effectiveness.
Yeah.
Talking about going above and beyond.
Right.
It was just right out of the field himself. Became a national, international leader.
Right. Cool. All right, so I got this next part. It's just down over here. This is a little more technical, right? So it just kind of to try to help us understand, and I presented this for college students. So if you guys want to stretch a little bit and think about if it, what makes sense to you, and if it doesn't make sense to you, then let's talk, and I'll try to I'll translate, if you will, for you. But what I want to point out is that even in this time when you're hearing so much rhetoric, and from the president's office, a lot of echoing Kathleen's point, kind of stereotypes are used or negative ideas. What this helps us do, what the study of international relations does, so some theory and then concretely, is just to look at the many different ways that these things work. And that the good news is that it changes all the time, right? So although there may be dark days right now, if you know people who have been deported, or you know families that are really struggling, if anybody's DACA and you're like, what the hell's going on, and I don't know what my future's gonna be, you know, I just wanna point out how these things change over time, and that there's hope in that might be changing. So in international relations, we have this set of theories, and the big fat ones are on this continuum, right? There's something from right to left, you know, right-left politics, I'm sure, right? Everybody's heard of those. And this one is a little different in that it helps us to think about kind of overarching concepts of how countries interact with each other. A realist perspective is a perspective that where the politics of that moment are that you know, our country has to hunker down and protect itself. We have to defend ourselves, our security's been threatened. It's like after 9/11, right? You guys are familiar with 9/11. I know it's happened before your time, but you know, so, but it really shaped the last 20 years of our lives, or last 17 years of our lives. And so that was a time when the whole country was like, yeah, we gotta be careful, right? And we gotta change some things. Of course, the holdover from that is the hard part, right? And the counterbalance of that is called idealist, and that's where ideas like, well, wait, you know, yeah, some things can happen and they might be really negative and scary, but we still have to talk to each other, build trust, like what's happening like with North Korea. Who thought 2 weeks ago, let alone 2 months or 2 years ago, that we would be, you know, that, you know, Kim Jong-un would be crossing the border into South Korea, and our president, who calls him the Rocket Man, calling him names, you know, would be like trying to sit down with him and have a conversation. So that's an idealist way of trying to work, like try to open things up. Maybe there'll be cooperation, we'll see. And so the tools of diplomacy, the tools of international relations for people who work at that level, right, might be you guys sometime, are summits, you know, on the idealist side, diplomacy, being good at talking with people, being good at working things out. In the middle, like in between these two kinds of ways of approaching politics, is more like kind of threatening things, or things that are going to pressure a government to do things like economic sanctions. Do you guys know what economic sanctions are? That makes sense. So economic sanctions are like when I say, if you're like the richest man in Russia, right, and you're kind of doing some corrupt things, and I'm going to put a sanction on you by saying, you know what, you can't do that here. Right, so you can't get a visa to come to the United States. That's a sanction. That's like it's kind of like a punishment, right? Another more extreme way to have sanctions is like maybe on an industry. Like, okay, in China, sometimes they're copying Microsoft's software and they're not paying what they should to do that, right? So we're gonna punish them or put a sanction on them by charging them money for exporting their goods, right? So that's another way that things can like be pressured, right, in that system. So if that doesn't work, then sometimes governments have to work harder, as in hard power. Like, you know, if you do that again, we're gonna send a bomb over there. Do you guys know what happened recently with that? Where did that happen?
Syria.
Right, okay, so what's going on in Syria?
I don't know too much about it. There's constant fighting going on. It's like a bunch of countries like
a lot of different groups. It's kind of hard to explain. I have a hard time explaining it too. So why did we send a missile over there? Who are we trying to, what's that message about?
Well, they were, I searched it up like a long time ago, because I didn't know myself. But they were throwing chemical bombs to the people that were going against them.
Yeah.
And it's been going on for a long time. I think ever since Barack Obama was the president, it was going on. And they told them to stop, and they wouldn't. Right. So the only way that they said that was to show them that you better stop is
to send a missile, right, and to bomb. So what our government tried to do is to bomb the installations of the chemical warfare that they are using, not to bomb more people, right? That was a goal, okay? That, you know, we don't want to cause more problems with the war. It's not our war, right? But you can't use chemical weapons against your own people. That's just not okay, right? So that's kind of that's a realist response to bomb somebody, okay? So there's some examples. And then if you go to war, like World War II, or the war that we are engaged in Afghanistan and Iraq, that's really concrete, right? And that's like really engaged kind of realist politics, okay? So So another part of the way we think about things in international relations, I don't want to go into this too much, is just thinking about how we get in our heads things like stereotypes, things like cultural influences that make a difference in how we perceive other people, and that could change the way we decide to react to them as a government. Okay. Do I just hit enter?
No, there's arrow.
So when we talk about immigration policy, this is where it gets more concrete and things that I think you guys are probably familiar with. On the idealist side, okay, these are some ways in which governments can support immigration. Okay, open up the borders a little more. Okay, have amnesty so that if people have been here for a long time and they want to stay, allow them to become citizens. Okay, to become legal. To increase the number of visas for certain kinds of workers or for certain kinds of people who are here. And then on the other side, when you become more realist related to immigration, right, that might be decreasing visas or the kinds of executive orders that Trump has sent out. Detaining people, deporting people, and then of course more extreme governments would even kill people, okay? And that might be intentionally or unintentionally, right? But like if you send them away, like gangs from El Salvador right now, if the people are here and it's understood that if they go back, their lives are under threat, but you send them back anyway, what is that, right? So there's some of that kind of interaction that we have to be aware of too. These are more examples, okay? And you all probably are familiar with some of this history, all right? Or you're learning it probably right now. Of some of the extreme moments of realist moments, right? When there was such a perception of threat in the mind of the government and the people supporting the government at that time that these kinds of extremes were carried out, okay? And some of that's kind of recent. When you think about the United Kingdom, you know, England and company getting out of, or talking about getting out of Europe. That's big news, okay? We call it Brexit. You guys are familiar with, you've heard of Brexit or not? Brexit is the Britain exiting from the European Union. Very destabilizing possibility. It still hasn't quite happened, but it's in process. And then Donald Trump and his kind of, you know, all over the map way of governing us, and with disparate kinds of support. Some support, but you know, when you get down to the numbers, only about a third of our nation supports the ideas that he's pulling about sending people back or having less people come into the United States. So there's a lot more people working at all kinds of different levels, and or not necessarily working at it, but with the view that that's not the way we should be working with immigrants, right? So I just want to point that out in terms of thinking about stereotypes and how that is having an influence here.
I actually have something to add.
Yeah.
But with the election of Donald Trump, that wasn't the only, the election of Donald Trump wasn't the only election in the world that was kind of crazy, kind of populist. Like for instance, in Italy right now, there was a campaign for a certain party and it was campaigning on fascist terms. So the ideas that they were campaigning for are completely fascist, and they're usually anti-immigration. France.
I don't know what fascist means. Do you guys know what fascist
fascist? Do you guys know what fascist means?
What does that mean to you when you hear that? Anybody?
It's like where the government controls like everything. Like it's like, what is it? Totalitarian.
Yeah, good. Okay. Right. And they even are like maybe racist.
Yeah.
Okay. Or putting people in prison based on race or based on images and stereotypes that, you know, are too broadly interpreted. Yeah.
And those same things are happening in France. It's happening in Denmark. So unfortunately, there's a trend right now, you know, with these ideals and these realist responses, it's kind of to immigration and migrants, especially with, you know, the issues going on in the Middle East. So.
Good news on the flip side is that back after World War II in the United Nations, okay, the Declaration of Human Rights was passed, and in that is a higher set of aspirations that are of an idealist style, okay? And they include some of these things, right? So would one of you read the part in purple, or you can read the whole thing, but who wants to read that for me? Why don't you read that part?
It says,
Well, you can read, read Article 1 for me.
all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act toward one another in the spirit of brotherhood.
What? Right? This is a principle for international law that most nations around the globe said, yes, we agree, okay? Who wants to read Article 2? It's a little more, yeah.
Everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. Furthermore, no distinction shall be made on the basis of the political, jurisdictional, or international status of the country or territory to which a person belongs, whether the independent, trust, non-self-governing, or under any other limitation of sovereignty.
All right. So I put in the part that's in purple and in italics, just to point out that this is an ideal that all these different countries aspire to. Do we fulfill it? No, not all the time, okay? But it's there, and it's a part of the basis for international law, okay? There's a few more. You guys want to read one of these? Sorry, I caught you on your own.
I can't see it. Oh, I can't see it from here. Read it. I can't.
Who wants to do it?
You'll read one, I'll read one? Oh, sure.
Go ahead.
Everyone has the right to recognition everywhere as a person before the law.
Great. So for that one thing to think about in particular, right now we have the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Police who are making raids on people, who are sometimes getting people up in the middle of the night and pulling, taking people away. Sometimes they have warrants, sometimes it's not real clear. And even though people who are in that situation are here and they may not be citizens, they have a right to having law be exercised in those kinds of scenarios, right? So this is where and how lawyers and people who are concerned about these kinds of actions by our government are able to say, hold on, like this is not okay, right? You can't treat people like this. This is fascist, right? This is not a time or a way that in this country we're gonna do this, okay? Because that's part of what, we're able to say. All right, who's got number 7? Alright.
All are equal before the law and are entitled without any discrimination to equal protection of the law.
Great. Okay, so that one's kind of self-explanatory, right? Who wants to do the last one? Number 9. Anybody? I'm pushing you to read it. Go ahead, man.
No, I really can't see it.
Oh, okay.
I didn't get it. I was right.
I'll read it again.
Go ahead.
No one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest, detention, or exile.
All right. So, again, that example I was talking about with particularly the immigration police of recent times, that's stuff that we got to be on top of. Okay. There are 30 articles in the Declaration of Human Rights. That's the United Nations Declaration. Okay, these 9 are the ones that have the most to do with our topic. Okay, that's why I chose those. But, so, we know that the times of Trump have brought a lot of different ways of thinking about this. I don't want to, kind of beat a dead horse here, but you're probably familiar with some of these things that came out of his executive order right when he got into office, all right? Deportations have increased. This is not news to you. What I want to point out, and what we're trying to do with some analysis with my students and I are gathering data, and if you come to Westchester and you work with us, we'd love your input too, okay? Into continuing to make an assessment of this. So if we were to put this on a scale, right, and we said, 1 is a really, in the middle is something that really doesn't make too much effect, and then if you go 1 to 10 out in both directions, okay, a more idealist or more realist, then what we did is we scored these different things that some of our presidents did, and we can add, and I do add some more pieces that other players are doing too, other actors in society. So if you see, with this one, right, before 9/11, Vicente Fox from what country? Was the president of Mexico, right? Okay, he was the first non-president of Mexico, and a really important moment for Mexico in terms of becoming a real legitimate democracy, right? It was major. They sat down and talked immigration before 9/11, like literally like the week before, okay? And they had some really good plans. So that was a great idealist moment, and then boom, right? Something completely out of the blue happened, it changed the whole scenario, and you know, what we've gotten since, okay? A lot of more realist kinds of responses and concerns, going to war in Afghanistan, going to war in Iraq, that have really changed things and how they've worked, deciding that a wall is a better way to try to, you know, treat our neighbor to the south and in Mexican relations, rather than figuring out good guest worker policy, right? Because a lot of people in Mexico just want to come and go. They don't necessarily want to stay here, right? Or they want to come and maybe get some education and then make decisions about where they want to be. Or come and go, you know, like it's like going to Florida or Texas, or, you know, Mexico is just one little place farther. All right, so Obama, okay, changed a few things. But this whole idealist, realist thing doesn't always fall like a Republican is a realist and a Democrat is an idealist. Everybody can use both, okay? So that's the good and the bad. It's not easy to pigeonhole this stuff, okay? All right, so, and Obama, you know, did some really important idealist things, but he also still deported a lot of people, okay? He used a different criteria. Usually it was there was more criminal record or criminal charges that were brought on a person, and that was the reason that they were deported, less than there is now, okay, under Trump. And then Trump, okay, we know some of those. Now what I want to kind of wrap this up with and leave for you all to discuss and add to, if you have others, is just to think about, to realize that, you know, even though Trump's in the news every day and all we hear about are Trump's tweets, you know, like all the time, there are so many other things going on, okay, at the state level and at the town level and at the city level that I want us to pay attention to and be aware of. And also, if you hear about them, or you guys are often on the front lines, know them. You know, how do we raise them up so that people pay attention to progress and not only fearful things or negative things about immigration? So I just want to point out a couple things that are going on and some of the organizations that are working with that. One here is called the Pennsylvania Immigration and Citizenship Coalition. Anybody heard of them? PIC? Okay. They do really great work. They got a workshop going on probably at the same time now, I think, that I wanted to go to. And they have a really good advocacy and ideas of how to help folks in immigration situations that either to gain citizenship or to improve your status or become more safe. There's also a group in Philadelphia that's known, it's called Juntos, and they do some really good cultural and political work as well. Some of that is related to, for example, they did a mural in South Philly that's called Ni Aquí Ni Allá, just as that guy was saying in that video that you saw, where for a lot of students, young people like yourselves who helped to paint the mural, sometimes they feel like they don't really have a place here or there, okay? But that can be freeing in another way, so that was a really interesting community effort to talk about that. And then DACA, okay, we know the pros and cons and what's been going on with that, and now where it's at. But cities like Philadelphia and some others, Westchester is thinking about this. Have you guys heard of Sanctuary? They're creating safe spaces for people with legal status that's either, you know, not resolved or in a transition, and people feel like they're at risk. So Sanctuary is another way that people are, you know, trying to create spaces for safety.
I just want, you can take your time, but when you're just done, everyone can go to the auditorium for the show.
Awesome.
I just wanted to say that.
Like 2 minutes, right?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay, all right. And then in Mexico, I just want to point out, I took some students to Mexico, the state of Morelos. Anybody who know people in the state of Morelos? Anybody have family down in Mexico? You do? Where?
My dad, well, he's from Morelos, but
okay. You don't know what town? Okay. So we went to Cuernavaca, which is the capital city, where there's a program that I used to work in. And then we also went out to a smaller town in a rural area called Ixtlilco El Grande, which has like 4,000 people, right, little tiny town. And they have a lot of families that go to Minnesota on a regular basis and do some agricultural work. So they have started a thing called Club de Immigrantes, or the Migrants Club, and that has done some really interesting work in trying to help reunite families, particularly mom and dads in Mexico who have not been able to connect, be able to travel to see their family members. I mean, people connect all the time with social media, right? Like, FaceTiming or different kinds of ways, but it's nothing like being there. So this program is called Corazones de Plata, the Silver Hearts program, and it started in Zacatecas and it's now in Morelos, and it's growing to have a certain amount of visas for family members to be able to come and go to visit, right? Which is just a really important part of people's lives, particularly grandparents and folks who maybe are back in Mexico or had to go back to Mexico and haven't been able to visit. And then another part of this, how do I, is this, how do I make that? Okay, good. Is a program where, so there's lots of, you guys know what remittances are? Money that gets sent back to countries of origin for people from which they've migrated. And so the local government in Morelos and in the town government in the farther out in Morelos have partnered to work with Club de Immigrantes, when people send back money, to be able to have big development projects for the town. Right, so it benefits the whole town. Some people build houses, and that's good. But what about fixing the health center, or adding a wing to the elementary school, or things like that? Starting having a public park, or fixing up a basketball court. Things that benefit the whole community. So there's a lot of those kinds of projects that are being done in this town. We saw a number of them, and the ones I just mentioned actually have happened through this program. So there's really some creative ways that are trying to be worked out besides what you're hearing from the top that I just want to point out in terms of hope. And the main point is that there's tensions constantly between these realist and idealist ways of doing politics internationally, but it also means that there's space. And as astute political thinkers, social thinkers that you guys are, I mean, you're here on a Saturday, which means you care, right? Like, this is really good, and you're educating yourselves. That's impressive to me. Keep going, right? Because there's a lot out there for you, and there's a lot of ways that you can take advantage of it. But for you all who are going to be doing this in your future, right? Just realize that there are times when it's prudent to use one or the other, or to put one out there, like one way we could resolve this like this, but let's try this, and to think about these different things. Just to realize that it doesn't have to line up with one's political, t-shirt that you have on that day or something like that. Don't let those things pigeonhole you, right, and make you think, oh, I better not say that because he's a Republican, or that teacher, I don't know, like they don't like it when you talk about, conservative issues or something like that, gun control or whatever is lately, going on. So I just want to point that out, and also to help us think that, realize that there's all kinds of levels of government that things can happen. And civil society, in our democratic societies in Mexico and here, makes a difference, right? Like, so even if you don't want to be in government, you want to work from the outside, there's plenty of space for that too. Yeah, so thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. So me and Dr. Stevenson, again, are working on research that has a lot to do with immigrant experiences. And we're putting together a survey, and it's not easy work. And, we don't know the best things to ask always. And you guys might have a better idea of the kinds of things we should ask to get, substantial data. So if you guys would be interested, or to contribute in any way, you want to sit down and have a focus group or talk, or
maybe in a couple weeks we'll have a meeting.
Yeah, and hang out and just throw around ideas. That would be something that would be so beneficial to us. And if you know other people and stuff like that. It would be very beneficial. So I do have a paper here, and you can just put your name and email, and we can send out a mass email if you're interested.